Hello everyone, back to today's second video. We're going to have a look at the weather for next week's 10 days. For today's second video, which will take us to around the 28th of March. We'll be able to extend out beyond that the extended GFS and ECM ensembles. They run around a couple of weeks, and we'll have a look at CFSV2 at the end of the video for the next 4 weeks. That takes us into the middle of April, really. So we'll begin with latest in terms of what's happening for stratospheric warming. It is still continuing to develop, and that's where we'll begin today's video update, talking about that. Just to say that the 5-day forecast has been released, so as also on Wednesday we have a look at weather the next 5 days, and we're going to be transitioning to something rather colder and drier in the coming 5 days, so have a look around and see what's going on there. Right, so we're beginning with the latest in terms of the GFS temperature forecast for 10 HPA in the stratosphere over the Arctic and the North Pole. Warming is occurring. Talking about this over the past few days in videos. Quite a significant warming of the stratosphere is developing there over the Atlantic side, and now beginning to push of the Arctic, and now beginning to push towards the Arctic itself. That first warming sort of levels off a little bit in the next couple of days, but then it gets renewed really as we go into the weekend. That's when the major southern stratospheric warming is occurring. These brighter red colours there, moving into the Arctic and into the North Pole. And that's when this warming will be at its peak, really, sort of Saturday, Sunday, and into Monday, with those bright red colours sitting right over top of the North Pole. Then beyond that, you see that we can't maintain that temperature indefinitely, but it sort of eases off, it fades back towards something more moderate in terms of warmer temperatures, but still significantly above average temperatures. Move right through to the beginning of April, as far as we can go for GFS today, to the 3rd of April. Basically, we keep the temperature relatively warm at 10 HPA in the stratosphere then. So it's all still on course. The warming is beginning, it has begun, it started, and it's going to intensify over the weekend and into next week. And we're waiting to see what, if any, tropospheric response we get from that southern stratospheric warming. Not as much about that today in video today. We talked about it quite a lot over recent days, so I thought we wouldn't have so much about it today. And of course, we will focus on it more as the warming really intensifies as we get to the weekend. Right, these were GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks for Liverpool today. So red light is 30-year upper air temperature average for Liverpool. We're going to go a bit cold on average in the next few days. So a cold snap coming up. We talked about this in the videos recently. So yes, things will be getting colder through the end of the week and into the weekend. Early next week it goes milder again. Temperatures lifting up in terms of the upper air temperatures anyway, although it will be associated with high pressure, so not necessarily all that mild down on the surface actually. And then beyond that, through like the last week of March into the opening days of April, just generally on the slightly cold and average side really. It does look like a relatively cool a very end to March and beginning to April. Precipitation wise, loads of dry weather coming up in the next week or so. Maybe hints at it going a bit more unsettled right at the very end of March into the beginning of April, but of course that's a very long way off. It's extended rain stuff. So I think we say that within the sort of reliable time frame, or semi-reliable time frame, which is week to 10 days, relatively dry conditions really. Once today, tomorrow's rain is out of the way in the south, of course. Temperature anomalies from the 18th to 26th of March are a bit colder than average. It looks pretty chilly, not just for the UK and Ireland, but through many parts of Europe actually in the weekend. Quite a sort of chilly week to come. And precipitation anomalies from the 18th to 26th of March are drier than average in most places as well. So rather cool to quite cold, and also a dry week to come. That's how the GFS is looking for Saturday. This is all covered by the 5-day forecast, of course. So on Saturday, we've got high pressure over Scandinavia. Winds are turning into the east. It's going to be quite a cold weekend. Where skies are clear, there will be some pretty chilly overnight frost. Into the early part of next week, we find that the Atlantic has a go at pushing back in. But overall, that's fended off quite a bit by high pressure to the east. So I think any rain next week is going to be quite light and patchy, mostly in the north and west, relatively limited. But we have got a weather system coming in here on Wednesday, the 25th of March. excuse me, after that we begin to see the high pressure re-establishing through the second half of next week, returning us back to relatively dry conditions once again. That's how it looks as we get to day 10. So then we've still got this sort of duel going on between low pressure out to the northwest, high pressure to the east, and also to the west-southwest. It's a messy picture, but overall a reasonable amount of dry weather continues up to day 10. After that, we go to the end of March and the beginning of April. We start to get signs of northern blocking. Now, this could be in response to the stratospheric warming that we're talking about at the moment. This could be the first signs of models picking up on it. Alternatively, it could just be that the GFS it's got run has gone off on a bit of a tangent. It's far too far out to have any confidence in it, and we would need to see other models picking up on this northern blocking signal too. But potentially this is the beginning of the tropospheric response to the stratospheric warming. This is Monday the 30th of March. High pressure may beginning to develop around Greenland. Low pressure as a trough beginning to sink southwards. And we're starting to go into quite a cold and wet pattern for the very end of March and the beginning of April. Loads of high pressure to our north, lots of northern blocking. Low pressure centred to the south of the country. There'll be weather fronts associated with that. So quite heavy rain. Winds in from the east. Quite cold and wet conditions for the beginning of April. That's how it looks as we get to the end of this GFS run, which is for Friday the 3rd of April, and again we're looking quite cold and wet. But please do bear in mind that could be that the GFS has gone off on a tangent. So it's possible that's a response to the stratospheric warming beginning to appear within the extended GFS, or it could just be that the model has lost the plot a bit in its extended range. We need many more runs before we can say that we are beginning to pick up on a tropospheric response to the stratospheric warming. GM looks like that. So again, high pressure is in dominating weather on Saturday. Winds are in from the east. It will be quite chilly, but a lot of dry weather on offer this weekend. And into the early part of next week, again, mainly dry. High pressure is in control. It will be quite cold, notably at night, where when skies are clear, there could be some quite harsh overnight frost. More influence from high pressure through to the middle of next week with the GEM. Actually, weather fronts are being kept at bay out to the north and west of the country. That's mostly dry up to the middle of next week. And even beyond that, high pressure is more or less in control, although its position does change. It sits to our west as we get to day 10, Friday, but no, that's not day 10, that's day 10. So it just sits to our west on Saturday, the 28th of March. And again, that's pulling in a wind from like a north-northeast direction. Again, a lot of dry weather with that. Could be some showers, maybe a little bit wintry across these parts of the country. The main thing with the GM is that it is quite a cold run, I think, particularly at night, with night frost likely through much of next week. And the ECM is looking like that. So again, high pressure is in control for Saturday, but winds are in from the east, quite chilly. And we keep these mainly dry, but quite cold conditions through the rest of the weekend and into the early part of next week. That's Tuesday. Weather beginning to push into north and west of Scotland. Brings about breaks of rain there, mainly dry for England and Wales. Again, still quite cold. And then into the middle of next week and beyond it, anticyclonic influences continue. There will be weather fronts coming and going, so it won't be continuously dry, but clearly high pressure is much more in control of the weather next week than it has been for quite a long time. So significantly drier conditions coming up. There will be rain around, there will be showers around at times, but the emphasis for the second half of March definitely shifting to dry weather, as we've been saying in videos a lot recently. Means the options are on the table within the ECM ensembles today for day 10, which gets us to the 28th of March. We have 21 members of the ECM ensembles, with high pressure out to our west and also to our north. Low pressure is to the south. Winds are coming in from an easterly direction. So the most unsettled condition with that will be in the south, and there could be some rain actually associated with that in the south. But overall, it's a relatively anticyclonic scenario, particularly for northern areas. Relatively dry. 14 members of the ECM ensembles with high pressure ridging in from the Atlantic to Scandinavia. Jet streams up here, that's going to be mainly dry and fine. 11 with high pressure pulling out into middle Atlantic, trough of low pressure to our southeast. That could be going a little bit more unsettled and quite cold. And then 5, which does include the operational run. So it shows that the operational run today from the ECM was actually not particularly well supported by its ensembles. This one with high pressure over and perhaps centred just to the west of the country. Again, relatively anticyclonic with that option. in 2 weeks' time, these are the options that we've got. This gets us to the 2nd of April. We have 28 members of the ECM ensembles with low pressure dominating the weather. So obviously going to be very unsettled for the start of April with that option. And then 23 have a Scandinavian high, low pressures out to our west, and winds are probably coming in from the east. So as we get to the beginning of April, actually the ECM ensembles are favouring a return to unsettled conditions and potentially quite cold conditions again, actually, as the jet stream sort of digs southwards a little bit like that. So quite cold and unsettled for the beginning of April, favoured by the ECM ensembles. SSW2 finally, so these are 500 millibar heights broken down to week periods. The first week period takes us from the 18th to the 24th of March. The coming week has above average heights over and to the east of the country, below average heights out to the northwest. Jet stream doing something a bit like that. So it's a much more settled week than we've had for quite some time. It won't be completely dry, but certainly the emphasis is shifting towards higher pressure. And that goes on into week 2 as well. This is the 25th to 31st of March, with above average heights again through the country and over to Scandinavia. So again, the emphasis is towards drier conditions there. Week 3 is the 14th to the 7th of April, is the first, I should say, to 7th of April, with above average heights still through the country, but weakening a little bit. That might be transitioning back to something slightly more unsettled. And then by the time we get through to week 4, we're back to unsettled conditions again. This is the 8th to the 14th of April, with low pressure properly dominating the weather. Jet streams digging southwards, so going quite cool or even relatively cold and unsettled through the opening or early part of April. So the stratospheric warming is still on course. That's going to reach its peak over the weekend. More about that in future videos. And we'll wait to see what the tropospheric response is. Again, the idea is still lots of high pressure next week. Not totally dry, but with weather fronts coming and going. But overall, shifting to much drier conditions from sort of the weekend onwards through next week. By the time you get through to the very end of March and into April, the GFS wants to generate some northern blocking. That might be as a result of the southern stratospheric warming, or it could just be the GFS going off on a tangent. We need to see that appearing on many more model runs and across model as well, with other models picking up on that. But there is a bit of a trend here, actually, for the early part of April to be but very least quite cool and unsettled, let's put it that way. And whether that's anything to do with the stratospheric warming or not, we won't know until close to the time whether we're going to get northern blocking involved in that, or whether we will just go back to a rather Atlantic-driven and westerly pattern. Right, so that's it for your videos for today. Tomorrow we'll have a week to 10-day video update with all of the usual features coming up as well. So come back for that tomorrow. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.